Welcome to Great Automotive Lives. I'm your host, Andrew, the classic car guy. I'm a motoring writer, photographer, and now, inexplicably, in the chilly autumn of my career, a Johnny-come-lately podcaster. This podcast aims to bring to life the stories, histories, intrigue and drama surrounding some of the automotive world's most interesting characters. Some may be well known, others less so, but I hope you will find all, in some small way, warrant you investing a little of your listening time hearing about lives remarkably lived. If nothing else, I hope something you hear today prompts further reading, listening or watching. We are of course privileged, after all, to live in a world today where the ability to drink in fascinating facts and information is limited only by one's thirst for knowledge. All that said, shall we crack on?
Why the Life of Ferruccio Lamborghini?
If you've been patient enough to partake of my first two podcast episodes, firstly, I thank you sincerely. Secondly, I heartily commend you for your superhuman levels of perseverance and resilience. In some contrast with the subjects of those, Charles Rolls and Donald Healey and their typical British reserve and self-deprecation, today we are injecting some Mediterranean heat and passion into proceedings. Ferruccio Lamborghini is hopefully and arguably a great automotive life. By all accounts he was a fascinating man, but also a decent, approachable and kind man. During my extensive research, I was taken by an account of a couple of journalists from Thoroughbred and Classic Cars who were invited to meet Lamborghini in 1991. At that juncture, Lamborghini was a sprightly 75-year-old who was still working 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on his vineyards near Lake Trasimeno in Middle Italy. The journalist found the senior captain of industry to be the kindest man we've ever met. He invites us back to his flat, sits us down and makes us coffee. Yeah, Ferruccio Lamborghini is making us coffee. Just imagine Enzo Ferrari making a coffee for visiting journalists in the kitchen of his Fiorano residence. Lamborghini's automotive legacy truly speaks for itself, of course, and perhaps this stark contrast between his personality and that of his neighbour from Modena is at the heart of what sets the two marques apart. So Ferruccio is what some of my countrymen might call a proper decent bloke, as well as a towering industry figure. As such, I commend his great automotive life to you.
The Life of Ferruccio Lamborghini.
Lamborghini himself remembers having to wait a very long time outside the office of Enzo Ferrari. He had enjoyed the several Ferraris he had owned, a 250 GT Coupe, one or maybe two 250 GT Berlinettas, a short wheelbase Scaglietti, and a 250 GT 2+2 by Pininfarina. But there was a problem. In each case, several clutch replacements were required, with a trip to Maranello and a subsequent 1,000 lira bill being the recurring upshot. Ultimately, and getting fed up with this, Lamborghini asked a mechanic in his tractor factory to disassemble one of the clutches to further investigate the problem. On removing the bell housing, the mechanic immediately recognized the clutch components. It was the very same 10 lira assembly that Lamborghini were using in their tractors at the time. On learning this, Lamborghini was incensed and resolved to have it out with Enzo Ferrari in person. He was a pretty good customer after all. It was this series of unfortunate motoring events that led Lamborghini to find himself waiting a frustratingly long time for an audience with the great man. Eventually, a minion ushered him in, and suddenly Lamborghini was facing Enzo Ferrari. In typical freewheeling Italian style, Lamborghini opened his account with a provocative, "Ferrari, your cars are rubbish." Perhaps unsurprisingly, Enzo Ferrari seemed moderately irked by this. He retorted, "Lamborghini, you may be able to drive a tractor, but you'll never be able to handle a Ferrari properly." At this, the meeting was hurriedly brought to an end, and Lamborghini was ushered out of the building. The two men were never to speak again. Lamborghini recalls seeing Ferrari again, however. "One day in Modena, I was entering a restaurant when I recognized Ferrari sitting at one of the tables. As I passed, I tried to greet him, but he turned his head away and pretended to be talking to the person next to him. He was ignoring me." Initially, Lamborghini just wanted his Ferraris to work properly, but after the frosty meeting with Ferrari, he resolved to make a perfect sports car. That might have been an empty resolution from many others, but this was Ferruccio Lamborghini, and he was made from sterner stuff. Ferruccio Lamborghini was born on the 28th of April 1916 to impoverished viticulturists Antonio and Evelina Lamborghini in Renazzo di Cento in the province of Ferrara in the Emilia-Romagna region of northern Italy. Like most of our subjects to date, young Lamborghini exhibited an early and obvious penchant for the mechanical. He was significantly more interested in the farming machinery, the actual machinations of the farming itself. His passion for machines drew him to study at the Fratelli Taddia Technical Institute near Bologna. Upon completing his studies, his father was keen for him to take on the management of the modest family's small holding. Ferruccio had different ideas, however, and started assisting a local blacksmith who was able to pass on metalworking, brazing, and welding knowledge. These newfound skills helped the young Lamborghini secure a job with Cavaliere Righi, a very prominent and respected mechanical workshop. Righi held a contract with the army to maintain and repair their vehicles. The restless and ambitious Lamborghini didn't stay with Righi very long, but his experience helped bolster an already plentiful confidence, as well as looking impressive on his rapidly burgeoning CV. The next step for Lamborghini, still in his teens, was to set up a workshop in Renazzo with his lifelong friend Marino Filippini, who had worked at Righi's as well. As it did with so many, of course, the outbreak of the Second World War put Lamborghini's professional life on hold. Given his mechanical prowess, he was drafted to the 50th Autoreparto Misto di Manovra, thankfully and usefully abbreviated to the Autocentro. The Autocentro was based on the Aegean island of Rhodes and was responsible for the maintenance of all military vehicles on the island. Through his diligence and flexibility, Caporalo Terry Lamborghini was soon given overall responsibility for the workshop, which in turn saw him report directly to the Italian High Command of the island. The diverse fleet of vehicles in use on Rhodes, which included tractors, staff cars, troop carriers, and even aircraft tow vehicles, gave Lamborghini a hugely valuable breadth of mechanical knowledge and understanding. In 1943, Italy signed the Armistice of Cassibile with the Allied forces, essentially ending hostilities between the Italian government and the Allies. Together with a broad range of unfavourable consequences, this encouraged Nazi Germany to occupy key strategic parts of the Italian territories, fearing that they would now just fall readily to the Allies. Despite there being around 30,000 Italian forces stationed on Rhodes, the Germans occupied it with an invading force of just 5,000 men over the course of about 5 days. The majority of the Italian service personnel readily surrendered and granted the Germans an almighty prisoner of war headache in the process. The feisty Lamborghini, of course, evaded capture. After laying low in hiding for a while and donning civilian garb, he offered his mechanical services to the Germans, who were happy to utilize his skills. When the British eventually liberated Rhodes in 1945, however, Lamborghini was not so lucky, being arrested as a collaborator. Even whilst interred as an Allied prisoner of war, Lamborghini's skills were recognized and welcomed. He would continue to repair and refurbish military vehicles, just this time for the Allies. Nothing if not pragmatic. Ferruccio was eventually repatriated to Italy in 1946, and this time he had company. Whilst on Rhodes, he had met and fallen in love with Clelia Monti, originally from Ferrara. Lamborghini and Clelia would marry at Santa Maria Chapel in Vado in Ferrara. Their union would be sadly curtailed. On the 13th of October 1947, Clelia would tragically lose her life whilst giving birth to their son Tonino. Within months, and with what some considered undue haste, Lamborghini married Anita Borgatti. Anita was the daughter of the proprietors of the Fontana Hotel in Centro and had studied economics at college. Anita would soon become a shrewd and stabilizing influence on Lamborghini's business interests. She became adept at financial accounting and human resources and would go on to be a huge asset to the developing businesses for close to 30 years. Perhaps more importantly, she immediately accepted young Tonino as her own. With Lamborghini transacting high-octane deals and building a worldwide profile, Anita adeptly kept the home fires burning and created a loving and stable home for Tonino. For his part, Tonino Lamborghini has always been vocal in his support of the person he very much saw as his mother. He would later say, "I really want to emphasize here the role of my mother, Anita, in the development of the Lamborghini empire. She was instrumental in all this. Behind every successful man you will find an intelligent woman. My mother built this business together with my father. They were a great team." Well said, Tonino, well said. With a powerful woman at his side, a young family in the making, boundless enthusiasm and ambition, and a post-war Italy struggling to put itself back on an even keel, Lamborghini found himself with the world at his feet. Almost immediately he opened a garage in Pieve di Cento. Lamborghini himself recalls this period. "I started motoring soon after the war with a Fiat Topolino. I went through a large number of them, and soon I began to tune them, taking the displacement up from 500cc to 750, and fitting my own Testadoro head to convert them from side valves to overhead valves." In 1948, Lamborghini and long-time collaborator Gianluca Baglioni entered one such modified Topolino into the first post-war Mille Miglia. They were about 700 miles into the race when their progress ended at a restaurant in Fano, which Lamborghini explained, "We entered by driving through the wall." Lamborghini's knowledge of tractors, initially gained on his father's smallholding and reinforced by his experiences on roads, stood him in fortuitous stead. With unfettered access to the, Azienda Rilievo Alienazioni Residuati centres, set up to dispose of wartime surplus, Lamborghini had the requisite skills, raw materials and market. The Carioca tractor was introduced to the public on the February 3rd, 1948, the day dedicated to Sant Biagio, the patron saint of Cento. The response to and interest in the tractor was warm and significant, and so a step up in production was deemed prudent. Lamborghini's father, Antonio, underscored his perpetual confidence in his eldest son by literally betting the farm on his lad's venture and providing it as collateral for a loan from Cassa di Risparmio di Cento. Now flush with borrowed lira, Lamborghini purchased 1,000 Morris 6-cylinder 3.5-litre engines, engaged more employees, and commenced production of the L33 tractor, an evolution of the Carioca. Ferruccio invented and later patented an innovative fuel atomizer device. This allowed for the tractor to be started with petrol before continuing to run on its native diesel. The reality of diesel as a fuel is that it's not terribly combustible compared to the more volatile petrol. That is why glow plugs are traditionally used to heat the fuel before igniting it. In cold weather, diesel is also prone to waxing from only around -4 degrees C. Ferruccio's atomizer arrangement bypassed all his farming worries, stealing a significant march on his competitors in the process. By 1950, Lamborghini's annual output had reached 200 units, and the workforce now numbered 30. By the following year, a move to larger premises was in order, with a 2.5-acre former racetrack being bought and a proper production company formed, Trattori Lamborghini. By 1952, Trattori Lamborghini received a fortuitous shot in the arm, in the form of the slightly dodgy-sounding Fanfani Law. The Fanfani Law, so named after Amintore Fanfani, Italy's Prime Minister of the time, set aside 125 billion lira with an interest rate of 3% over 5 years for farmers who purchased Italian-made agricultural machinery. This stroke of political good fortune would help Trattori Lamborghini on to consistently bigger and better things. The significant financial gain that came Lamborghini's way as a result of this tractor-based success enabled him to indulge in his lifelong passion for cars. As we have already heard, he had a succession of Ferraris, but also a Mercedes-Benz 300 SL, an E-Type coupe, and several Maseratis. Following his run-in with Mr. Ferrari, however, he became determined to produce his own Ferrari competitor, only better. Lamborghini recalls his early experimentation with his own 250 GT. To start with, I bought a bigger clutch from Borg & Beck and had it fitted in the tractor factory workshop. Then we discarded Ferrari cylinder heads. They were rather simple affairs with just a single overhead camshaft and 12 rockers. I had them replaced by heads of our own design with twin cam shafts. We put the engine back in the 250 GT and fitted 6 horizontally mounted carburetors. It was already quite a good car. Several times I used to wait for test drivers from Maranello with Prova MO plates on their cars at the entrance of the motorway near Modena. After some time we would be doing 230, 240 kilometers per hour, and then I would start to pull away from them. My Ferrari was at least 25 kilometers per hour faster than theirs thanks to our 4-cam conversion. These modifications helped Lamborghini envisage the exact specification he wanted for his inaugural supercar, namely a V12 configuration with 4 camshafts in the head, 2 valves per cylinder, 6 twin-choke carburetors, and dry-sump lubrication. As was his way, Lamborghini selected the best talent available to bring his vision to life. The design of a sophisticated power plant was left to Giotto Bizzarini, who had worked at Ferrari and was involved with the development of the 250 GT 2+2 and GTO. The bodywork would be the responsibility of Franco Scaglione. A sizable plot was purchased at St. Agata Bolognese, and a purpose-built headquarters and production facility quickly took shape. Lamborghini Automobili officially opened in the autumn of 1963 under the emblem of a rampant bull. This was partly in recognition of Lamborghini's birth sign of Taurus, partly due to his admiration of the art of bullfighting, but also perhaps because the determined, stubborn beast was an unerringly accurate totem for the man himself. First product of Lamborghini's brains trust was the 350 GTV. The GTV looked like something George Jetson might drive, so was deemed a little too futuristic for the time. Lamborghini got his wish, however, in the engine department, with the GTV featuring a 3.5-litre V12 Bizzarini masterpiece. It had the 6 downdraft Weber carburetors and a dry sump lubrication system that had been envisaged, together with aggressive valve timing, a dizzying 8,000 RPM redline, and a whopping, for the day, 340 brake horsepower output. One suspects this specification may have precipitated a bout of nervous coughing over in Enzo Ferrari's office. If so, Lamborghini would have been delighted. The 350 GTV never made series production, with only one prototype ever being built. It did, however, provide the origins for the first production car to carry the now famous rampant bull emblem, the 350 GT. Perhaps inevitably, and possibly with the goading of Anita, Lamborghini learnt some hard lessons in economics with the production of the 350 GT. In order to make the production car anywhere near economically viable, a bit of de-specifying was required. Out went the racing-style dry sump in favour of a more conventional and cheaper wet setup. The costly 36mm downdraft racing Webers were replaced with more conventional 40 DCOE side draft items. The compression ratio was dropped and the cam profiles were softened to make the new car much more suited for durable road use. Despite this bout of real-world pragmatism, the detuned unit was still good for 270 brake horsepower, thus endowing the 350 GT with 150 mph plus top speed. Touring of Milan were commissioned to use their patented Superleggera method of construction to apply a curvy aluminium alloy body to the frame. Lamborghini produced 120 350 GTs before replacing the model with the Lamborghini 400 GT in 1966. The 350 GT was an auspicious start for the Lamborghini Automobili story and provided a perfect springboard for many of the iconic and world-beating models that would follow. The superb V12 engine, for example, would provide the template for Lamborghini V12s right through until 2010. It wasn't just the cars, however, that moved fast at Sant'Agata Bolognese. It was the model development as well. By 1966, the P400 Miura was unveiled at the Salone dell'Auto in Turin. The Miura was instrumental in securing Lamborghini's place as the most serious competitor to their near neighbours in Maranello. Even within its own life, the Miura was considered as much an art piece as it was a mode of exhilarating transport. No surprise then that a Miura has been exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art in New York since 1968. Despite the string of sublime models that would follow in equally quick succession, including the four-seater Espada and the dramatic Countach, Lamborghini's fortunes would start to falter as early as the 1970s. With a worldwide energy crisis taking hold and financial headwinds facing Trattori Lamborghini as well, Lamborghini felt the time for drastic measures was nigh. In 1972, he sold 51% of his shares in Lamborghini Automobili, which must have felt like sawing off a limb with a slightly rusty cheese knife. As we've seen, however, Lamborghini was nothing if not a pragmatist and divested the shares to Georges-Henri Rossetti, a wealthy Swiss businessman and friend of Ferruccio's, as well as the owner of an Islero and an Espada. For what sounds like a surprisingly measly $600,000 US, about $10 million today, Lamborghini ceded control of the company that bore his name. But perhaps that was just an indication of the depth of the malaise. The following year, he would sell his remaining 49% to René Lima, a friend of Georges-Henri Rossetti. True to form, Lamborghini's timing was spot on. Within a few short years, the company would fall into bankruptcy, with Lamborghini having sold the tractor business in 1972 to the same group. Not the same group, but the same group. He was suddenly both cash and time rich and ready for the next chapter. The next chapter seemed to involve the next wife too. At around this time, Lamborghini's long, childless marriage to Anita came to an end. His third wife was Maria Teresa Cain, and at the age of 58, Lamborghini welcomed a second child to the family, a daughter, Patrizia. In another full-circle moment, Lamborghini would also finally become the viticulturist his father Antonio had always hoped for. Lamborghini bought a 740-acre estate named La Fiorita on the shores of Lake Trasimeno in Castiglione del Lago, a town in the Umbria region of central Italy. In true overachiever style, he turned a few overgrown and ramshackle buildings into one of the most modern agricultural estates in Europe. He would transform the farmhouse, buy more land, and ultimately create one of the most innovative wineries of the period. Of course he would. With his entrepreneurial tendencies seemingly undimmed by age, he would add tennis, swimming and golf facilities to his estate, making it a fully fledged resort and a significant source of retirement income. At 76 years of age, on February the 20th, 1993, Ferruccio Lamborghini died at the Silvestrini Hospital in Perugia after suffering a heart attack 15 days earlier. Lamborghini is buried at the cemetery of Renazzo. Appropriately and touchingly, a Lamborghini DL20 tractor, Ferruccio's personal favourite, pulled a flower-bedecked cart on which the great man's coffin was laid as part of the cortege.
Summing up Ferruccio Lamborghini.
It takes a certain type of person to set up a world-renowned supercar manufacturer, seemingly on somewhat of a whim that within 10 years would prove a worthy competitor to the mighty Ferrari. And yet that's exactly what Ferruccio Lamborghini achieved. In 1963 there was no Lamborghini Automobili, and yet by 1973, when Ferruccio divested his interests, there had been the Miura, the Espada, the Girama, the Urraco, and the development at least of the Countach. Surely a perfect illustration of the drive, determination and ambition of the man. In addition to that, and in the words of the great Kenny Rogers, he knew when to hold 'em, knew when to fold 'em, knew when to walk away, knew when to run. Ferruccio's business timing seemed impeccable, from the founding of his tractor business just ahead of the Fanfani enactment to selling his manufacturing interests while there was still some value to be appreciated. Despite his car empire especially becoming somewhat of a corporate hot potato after his tenure, both Lamborghini cars and tractors are still with us today in 2025. The work that Ferruccio did in that fateful 10 years or so at Sant'Agata was sufficiently remarkable to make his name and the cars that bore it one of only a handful that the staunchest non-car person would immediately recognize. As if to underscore the measure of the man, Ferruccio's idea of retirement was not a bag of Werther's Originals a day and a game of bridge on a Thursday lunchtime, but rather the creation from scratch of one of Italy's foremost wineries and leisure complexes. History seems to remain annoyingly stum about what Enzo Ferrari would ultimately think of Lamborghini's cars. One suspects he actively ignored their existence and shunned contact with any bull-badged supercars. My bet, however, is that behind those omnipresent dark glasses he was bloody seething. Perhaps in a parallel automotive universe somewhere, Enzo Ferrari would daily stroll out to a secluded outbuilding on his estate, open a creaking barn door, and take a while to feast his prominent, darkly bespectacled eyes on his own private collection of Lamborghini Miuras, whilst cracking a wry smile and muttering, "Damn you, Ferruccio, damn you."
In the footsteps of Ferruccio Lamborghini.
It is sometimes nice for the committed autophile to find an excuse for a road trip or two, and what better way to stretch the legs of your Jarama, Urraco, Aslero, or in my case 1983 Land Rover Series 3, than to walk in the metaphorical footsteps of the great man. Ferruccio Lamborghini is the first of our great automotive lives to have inspired a museum dedicated to his work. In true Ferruccio style, there are in fact two in the Bologna area, making a trip to the vicinity all the more appealing. Museo Ferruccio Lamborghini is an Italian museum in Argalato, close to the city of Bologna. The museum was inaugurated in 2014 in a project managed by Ferruccio's son, Tonino. The 9,000 square metre museum tells the story of Ferruccio's life through his mechanical creations and via a vast family photographic archive. There are many examples of his legacy here, from the first Carioca tractor to all the most important Lamborghini models of the 50s, 60s and 70s. On a more personal level, there are some of his own cars on display, such as the 1948 Mille Miglia Fiat Barchetta, as well as a recreation of his original office at the tractor plant. Automotive Lamborghini Museum is slightly less about the man and more about the company left behind throughout all its different iterations and owners. Situated at Sant'Agata Bolognese and attached to the Lamborghini factory, this is an official company representation of the past, present and future. Accompanied tours of the factory and production lines are also offered from time to time, making this a must-do experience for the Lamborghini aficionado. To better get a sense of the man in later life, it is possible to visit his retirement estate, winery and golf course complex. Situated in Panicale in Umbria, it's possible to visit the great man's vineyard, taste its wines, and even partake in a couple of chukkers of golf on the course that Ferruccio himself designed in 1991. No trip in homage to the great man would be complete, of course, without a visit to his final resting place. This can be found in the Cimitero di Renazzo, Provincia di Ferrara, Emilia-Romagna. Ferruccio is interred here in an ornate family crypt, but far from the most ostentatious in the cemetery. This is surely a great place to spend a moment of reflection, perhaps leave a flower, or at least a few words of quiet admiration and thanks. In the accompanying show notes you will, probably, should, maybe, might find links to these Lamborghini-related tributes to assist you in your road trip planning. Happy motoring! I truly hope you found today's great automotive life interesting, inspiring, or at the very least a useful jumping off point for your own onward journey of discovery. Much like an underinvested and dysfunctional mass transportation system, I'm reasonably likely to amble along again at some undefined point in the near, medium or far future to invite you to join me on another automotive tangent of discovery. Inevitably, and for the sake of brevity, the fascinating details of this great automotive life have been significantly distilled, and so preemptive apologies are offered for glaring omissions, of which there are probably many. Your input and feedback is welcome, of course, on the understanding that I'm pathetically thin-skinned, so go easy with me. A contact email address is trepidatiously provided in the accompanying show notes. Until then, please tell many others if you enjoyed this podcast, and even perhaps leave the 21st century's equivalent of a thumbs up at the Colosseum in the form of a warm and fluffy review. It not only helps me avoid becoming moodier and more irascible, but also helps others find the podcast and generally makes the world a tiny bit nicer for a vanishingly small number of people. If you hated it, tell no one. Until next time, dear listener,